I remember one time when I was at Willow Creek on staff there as a pastor, I was called to help out in an out-of-control situation. There was kind of a domestic violence situation that was happening in one of the classrooms. It wasn't during service times, and there weren't a lot of staff there, so they decided to call the largest staff on the staff team to come and break it up. I was the big guy that got called. And so we went over into this classroom, and by the time I was there, the physicality had subsided, but in one side was a girl who was whimpering, "Please get me out of here. Please get me away from him. I have no power, no control, no car, no money. I don't know what I'm going to do. Please get me away." And on the other side of the room was a guy who was laughing and who had evil eyes that I'll never forget. And so I went over by the guy and escorted him out of the church. He left without a fight, but for the 5 minutes between the classroom and the car where he left, he kept saying things to me like, "She'll come back. I know she will. You can do whatever you want, but she's going to come back to me on her knees. She always does come back. She's going to come back again." And I just thought, who would ever come back to an evil, evil guy like you when she has an option to get out? And so I and a female staff member met with this young lady, and we offered her all of the services that our church had to offer, and shelter and food and clothes, and we got her taken care of for the evening, and the services that we were going to use had closed for the day, but as our church policy was, we got her a hotel room for the evening, allowed her to stay there, and promised her we'd pick her up first thing in the morning to get her everything that she needed. And so I went home that night, came back the next morning to pick her up, and she was gone. She had left the hotel room. She left her purse behind, though, and the hotel staff said, "If you know where she is, could you take this purse back to her?" We had collected her address, and so I tried to call her all day long. When we tried to get a hold of her, we couldn't, and so we went to the apartment address that she had given us. And when we knocked on the door, there was Evil Eye Guy answering the door. And she was in the background. I could see her passed out on a couch. And he just looked at me and he said, "I knew she would come back. I told you she would come back to me." And I thought, this girl is broken. She's not thinking clearly. Because nobody stays in that lifestyle voluntarily. There are some people who maybe got into the lifestyle initially voluntarily, but nobody stays under that level of violence and manipulation because they want to be there. The cult mindset dominates these deeply abused girls. They've been human trafficked. Modern-day slavery in which people profit from exploiting others through force, fraud, coercion, or deception. And according to this definition, or any reasonable definition, these girls are slaves. And this was the change in my thinking. Instead of thinking of them as criminals, I thought of them as precious people who are created in God's image and deeply loved by God, who have been victimized in a horrific, evil enterprise. That they are slaves to be set free. They are objects of God's affection. They're not the criminals, they're the victims. They've been cruelly abused, and they're doing something that they hate to do. And you have to ask the question, who's going to help them? I mean, their customers aren't. Their owners aren't. I remember the words of Jesus. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because He's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." If we're asking who's called to do this, who's likely to do this, it's people who buy into this value system. It's the followers of Jesus. And if we want to be like Him, we can't just stand idly by and let this keep on happening to young women right underneath our noses. Now, my impression has been that human trafficking is something that happens over there, in Thailand, in Brazil, in Mexico, and the inner cities of our larger cities in the nation. And this is all true. But it's not all. It's also happening right here in Nebraska. The problem is right before us.